So yes, cylinders 101. First,
how are you not going to get popped by the little things coming up?
oh, just be careful. So first thing is centering the clay. You can tone it up and down a few times, especially if your clay is not like that well wedged. You know, if it's got some air in it, this will should get rid of it, especially when you go down. And you can pretty much do this with one hand. Like if you just squeeze in, this hand helps, especially going up. But then when you come down, you can really just push in with this part of your hand. You can also you do the karate chop, quite like that. So yeah, that's basic centering. All your energy is going to the middle of the clay, and you want it centered from bottom to top. If the bottom's not centered, then the top won't be. Okay, so that's our first basic shape.
How big balls have you got there?
2 pounds.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you're starting off, if your balls are like as round as possible, then that's ideal. And you don't want the speed too fast, that's a bit fast. This pedal's a bit. So yeah, I'll do this coning up, cone down.
Well, it's not doing.
Right.
Because for some things they look big and
So the main thing is you're just like really stable and steady. Like you're in a triangle, you know, your arms are locked into your thighs. Or now I'm locking into the pan of the wheel. Yeah, just don't let the clay move you around. You're telling it where you want it. Okay, so there's our second shape.
Can you take a dip out of it?
Yeah, I like to have this little. It just keeps it neat and clean.
Do you ever find it harder or easier to work with larger or smaller amounts of clay?
Yeah. It's sort of very small is hard and very big is large. But in between are kind of similar, I think. I'm alright up to about 5 pounds. After that it gets harder. So you want it really totally centered before you open it. Oh, another thing is when you go onto the clay and lift off, you want to be really gentle in those transitions. So now to open it, basically, I just use my thumb like an arm, just like down into it. It's very easy, and then on the outside, this hand is just supporting it. So I'm just going to push down. And you push down to the desired depth, which is, I don't know, maybe 1/4 of an inch. Should have a pin tool somewhere. That's a bit thick, so I'll take it down a little bit more. And you can use your fingers too. It just depends what you like. But I like the thumb. It's just quite easy to do that. Okay, so that's your third step. And yeah, you want to keep the clay lubricated so that it, you know, flows through your hands, but you don't want it too wet, and especially in later stages, it can weaken the pot. Alright, so I'm going down with my thumb. So now we're ready to open it up. So I'm going to use my middle finger mostly. This hand supporting the outside. And I'm just pulling towards myself. So you want to go a little bit wider than you are going to end up with it, because you'll be squeezing it in enough later. And I always, once I've opened it, go back and compress the base so that you're not getting any splitting.
Now, your walls on the inside, are they vertical or is it slightly curved?
It's basically, it's got a little angle from where I put my thumb in, and I've just pushed out to create this undercut under here, so that when we pull it up, that'll be the right angle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always like to take that little bit out.
The way you want it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so if the wheel's going too fast, it's kind of harder to keep everything in check. Oh yeah, and when you're opening, like I was saying last week, most of your pressure is just downwards and then towards yourself, not thinking about just ripping it back. And then yeah, again I'll push forwards, create that undercut. So now we're ready to cone it in. And this move is mostly your right hand, the palm of your right hand. And with my left hand I'm holding my thumb on the very base, finger just inside, and that's just kind of guiding, but mostly I'm just going to push with this right hand. And then when you get there, basically just compress the rim, and at this stage you really want it to be super centered. I mean, you do it every stage, but but now it's quite easy to recenter it, like putting some pressure in there, making sure. Yeah. Oh yeah, thanks.
So you barely even go to the cone in that stage, do you?
Yeah, you'd actually, you know, the more you do it, that's not necessarily essential. Like old country potters won't bother coning it up and down, but it's just, it does help. Alright, so now basically this move, it's kind of a centering pull, and we're just going to gain like another inch of height. It's kind of the same as what we just did, but this time I'm really trying to dig in with this thumb. and get some of the weight out of that base corner, because that's like where the weight is always, it's hard to get it out of there. So you start that right from here, and then a bit of that right hand, and we're going to make it a smaller opening at the top. And again, compress that top. And I think, you know, ideally I want this a little tighter, so I can just go in and do that. So that's got you set up, ready to do a nice pull. Do it all again. And don't move on to the next step until you've got the one before really just right. Okay, so yeah, so now basically I've got this little thumb out that I do quite often. Now I'm going to jam my knuckle right in there, and that'll be
when I
just.
do that, it tends to catch the clay.
Yeah. So one thing you can do is take your fingers and just, you know, round that out and make it not so sharp. Just your thumb can leave kind of a sharp edge, but. So your knuckle is just below your finger, and what you're looking for this bulge, and you're going to raise it up and inwards, and at the end you just ease off. And so, especially with something of this height, like 2 pounds of clay, I like to use this middle part of my finger, so it's very strong. To instead of, you know, before we push down with that H kind of shape to compress it, now I like to do it with that part, whilst also with my left hand kind of bringing it in. If your motion is always coning in, it goes much easier. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. Yeah. And you know, there are different ways of doing each of these steps, and you might find that something works for you that just feels really good, and if it works, then great. Another thing is, like, if you at any time you can have your hands together, that really helps keep everything in order. You're much stronger. Okay, so I'll go in for the pull. easing off at the top. So now you've got something that's, you know, reasonable, but you want to make it into a straight-sided cylinder. So you can take a wooden rib, and you can actually do quite a lot with a wooden rib. Like right then I was just pushing in quite hard, because I want it to be a little skinnier than this. And you can also pull against this rib, so like instead of using your knuckle, you can apply a decent bit of pressure, like squeeze it up. And you can also just use it as a flat edge to push against to make, you know, to make that nice cylinder. Right now I'm not really pulling it, squeezing it, I'm just pushing against, keeping the edge and pushing against it. So then another thing is the rims. I like to, yeah, you can choose what sort of rim you like, but I like to have a little angle on the inside. And then when you're about to get ready to take it off the wheel, you want to get the water out. This is my aspirational stick. One cylinder's this tall. And then take a little edge off the bottom. That helps keep it nice and clean. Take your wire it off. When you take it off the wheel, you want nice clean hands and no slip, and that wooden rib helps get rid of the slip. Some people like to throw with the rings still in it, which is cool, it's personal preference, but I like using the rib. Yeah. Cool. There we go.
Beauty.
Thanks.
Should we just go now?
8 steps.
I know, that looks really easy to me. Yeah, you just went rip.
Good. Well, I got that.
Okay then. We'll go back to making.
Hop to it.